Back in 2018, the biggest active underwater eruption ever happened, at least the one that we could officially record. Scientists followed earthquakes that struck the area in the western Indian Ocean off Madagascar. Between 2018 and 2021, over 11,000 earthquakes struck a small island called Mariana between Madagascar and Mozambique. The strongest one had a magnitude of 5.9. Until then, this area had been pretty peaceful. There had only been 2 earthquakes recorded over 50 years. Along with regular earthquakes, there were also some unusual seismic hums, like earthquakes at pretty low frequencies, forming deep underground. People couldn't feel those hums at the surface, but researchers around the world discovered them and realized they were related to volcanic activity no one actually noticed coming. Something strange happened. That underwater eruption created a giant skyscraper-sized volcano. This new underwater volcano turned out to be around 1.5 times the height of One World Trade Center in New York, and almost 10 times bigger than the Statue of Liberty. The area where it appeared had been explored in 2014, but it was almost flat, peaceful, and empty back then. Now, there is an actual volcano nearly 8,500 feet below sea level. The volcano gets its magma from a super profound reservoir located nearly 34 miles underground. It's the deepest reservoir of volcanic magma that we know about. The Earth has layers, and the middle one is kinda chunky. It's very much like peanut caramel filling many chocolates have. Research shows there are probably hunks of oceanic crust deep inside the Earth's liquid mantle. They're stuck there, creating large lumps in something that was supposed to be a smooth layer. Our planet has a rigid outer layer. It includes a hot upper mantle and cracked crust. The hot mantle moves and churns all the time, making the crust at the surface move too. This way, the oceanic crust dives into the depths and makes huge magma plumes go up toward the planet's surface. Scientists even found an ancient piece of the Pacific Ocean hundreds of miles underneath China. Those are the old remains of the Pacific seabed from long ago, and they were pulled downward below Earth's surface into the mantle transition zone. This rocky slab that used to be at the bottom of the ocean is made of the crust and some solid parts of the upper mantle. Most of the volcanic activity on our planet happens where we don't even see it, under the surface of the ocean. About 70% of all volcanic activity happens in the oceans, and mostly in the area of the South Pacific, with over 1,100 volcanoes squeezed into that area. Coastal cliffs, mountain changes, soils, and sediments that line valleys. These are only a small portion of the rocks on our planet. Oceans hide so much more deep down below the Earth's surface. In between the Earth's surface and its core is the mantle. It's a warm, thick layer of rock that moves and flows constantly. Some hundreds of miles below, there's a place where diamonds grow. As they form, they go through high temperatures and pressure, after which they eventually freeze. That way, when they arrive at the surface, scientists can explore their structure, find out how they formed, and understand better what's going on in the depths of our planet. Thanks to diamonds, they realized the mantle was very wet, and it possibly contained much more water than all the oceans on Earth. Our planet is eating up its own oceans. As its tectonic plates move, dive, and go beneath one another, they drag huge amounts of water into the Earth's interior. The water beneath the surface of our planet can help with developing magma and lubricate faults, which actually makes earthquakes more likely to happen. Water is actually stored in the minerals. It gets incorporated into the planet's crust when new oceanic plates form. They go through the process of bending and cracking as they grind under other plates, and huge amounts of water then go deep into the crust and mantle. Scientists research an area that's 18 miles under the surface. They realize these zones pull 3 billion teragrams, which is more than 2 billion pounds. Any ocean is like a whole new world. There are incredible sceneries below the surface, magnificent waterfalls, lakes, and rivers. There are thick layers of salt beneath the seafloor, and rivers and lakes form because seawater goes through those layers and dissolves them, creating something that resembles pools. The dissolved salt makes the surrounding water denser. That water then settles there, which eventually forms underwater lakes or rivers. But there are also mountain chains, trenches, canyons. There's a canyon in the Bering Sea with more than 8,500 feet of vertical relief. This makes the Grand Canyon look way smaller than it is, since the underwater canyon is nearly 2,500 feet deeper. Deep parts of the ocean are really cold. The temperature of the water can be about 40 degrees, but at the bottom, water can get boiling hot. There are hydrothermal vents in the seafloor. Those are the hot springs located at the edges of tectonic plates. The water they release can reach a temperature of up to 750 degrees Fahrenheit, but the pressure at such depths is very intense. So intense, no human being can handle it. Still, it's the pressure that keeps the water from boiling. Ocean depth is on average 2.3 miles. Light waves can still enter at 3,280 feet, even though it's in a very small amount, so all the mysteries hidden below that point remain in total darkness. The actual illuminated part of the ocean goes until 600 feet. Even though the sun gives us light, most of our planet is dark all the time. It's all because of the oceans, covering over 70% of our planet. The loudest sound that came from an ocean, and of the loudest sounds ever recorded, came from an ice quake. It was so loud, researchers picked it up by sensors more than 3,000 miles away. There was a seismic activity that made frozen ground break down. The Antarctic ice sheet is bigger than the continental part of the United States and Mexico together. A big iceberg from Antarctica holds over 20 billion gallons of water, which could make a 5-year water supply for 1 million people. Humans can generally drink sea ice, although we can't drink seawater. As time goes by and the ice ages, the brine trapped between ice crystals drains out. That way, ice becomes fresh enough to consume it. If all the ice sheets and glaciers we have on the Earth melted at the same time, the sea level would rise another 260 feet, which is just a little shorter than the Statue of Liberty, the height of a 26-story building. Clams lived long enough to tell us more about oceans past. Ancient mollusks can live for more than 500 years. To learn more about a tree, you can use its rings to see how old it is. To learn how old a mollusk is, you can examine its rings within the shell and tell. This is also how scientists get information about the ocean, climate, and whatsoever. Clams can help take a look at what happened about 1,000 years ago. The Earth doesn't have 4 but 5 oceans now. The new one, called the Southern Ocean, was officially recognized only a few months ago. It borders the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans, so scientists couldn't agree if it's really a new ocean or just part of the colder regions of these 3. We don't only divide oceans on maps, each has different conditions for unique marine species. For example, the Southern Ocean has leopard seals, orcas, minke whales, emperor penguins, and other animals that live in cold, icy seas. It's also home to krill, small creatures that look like shrimp and are food for many bigger animals that live there. Life on our planet started about 3.5 billion years ago. I wasn't around then. It's still a mystery how and when exactly, but some theories say life could have first emerged in the depths of the ocean. A few years ago, scientists found microscopic tubes and filaments within rocks formed about 4 billion years ago. These rocks are fragments of ancient oceanic crust. Also, these tiny tubes and filaments are similar to microbes that can still be found on hydrothermal vents in deep parts of the ocean. The idea is these living cells found conditions to stay alive in tiny rocky pores inside the chimneys of those vents, and started the amazing adventure of the evolution of life on our planet.
Oh wow, there's a hole in the bottom of the ocean! It seems that the ocean has a leak. But it's not like a leak you would expect, where water is flowing out. It's more like a spring since water is flowing in, not out. This unique leak is something we know as Pythia's oasis. A grad student was the one who accidentally discovered it. He noticed bubbles that were rising to the surface. Normally, bubbles in the ocean tell us there might be some hydrothermal vents, which are hotspots for some pretty cool things. These vents are actually like hot springs on the seafloor. But instead of bubbling with warm water, they release a fluid that has been superheated in the crust of our planet. When seawater seeps into these cracks and travels deep into the crust, it comes into contact with the extremely hot mantle. This heats seawater to very high temperatures, and as it moves back up towards the surface, it carries dissolved gases and minerals. When the hot fluid shoots out of the vents, it mixes with the surrounding seawater and quickly cools down. Just a short distance away from the vent, the temperature can drop to a comfortable 68 degrees Fahrenheit or so, which is, as it seems, exactly what some creatures like. And there are some real weirdos living down there in the darkness, like ghostly fish, giant red-tipped tube worms, and a unique type of shrimp with eyes on their back. And some of them, like tube worms and bacteria, rely on the chemicals and minerals released by the vents to survive in harsh conditions. But in this case, the bubbling water didn't come from a hydrothermal vent. It was there because of a spring, and that's a bit more concerning. You see, the water in this reservoir needs to stay where it is. If too much of it seeps out, there could be some serious consequences, especially for the surrounding area. You can see this unusual leak along the Cascadia subduction zone, which is a massive fault line off the Pacific Northwest coast. It's a place where two pretty big plates that make up Earth's crust come together and slide along each other. The water from Pythia's oasis kinda acts as a lubricant between these plates. You can think of the fault zone as an air hockey table. When the fluid pressure is high, it's like you've turned the air on. That means the friction between the plates is reduced, which allows the plates to move. But if the fluid pressure is lower, the two plates can lock together, which then leads to the buildup of stress. Not that they'll feel bad. In the context of tectonic plates, stress is some pressure or force that can cause deformation. And if this stress starts to build up, at some point, it's gotta go somewhere. When it's too much, it can trigger earthquakes and most likely, not small ones. For example, a release of stress in the Cascadia subduction zone could lead to a magnitude 9 earthquake. For comparison, the biggest earthquake we've ever recorded happened in Chile in 1960. And it had a magnitude of 9.5. The damage was enormous. So we hope the water will stay in its reservoir and keep maintaining the delicate balance between the tectonic plates. We've explored only 5% of the ocean. Who knows how many cool things are there at the bottom, waiting to be found? For example, check out these mysterious holes scientists have stumbled upon in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, near the Azores. They're neatly aligned and are about 4 inches apart, or in some cases, even several feet. They resemble punctures left by a sewing machine. Some think these holes could have a biological origin. For instance, some fish may have made them while walking along the seafloor. Others believe we could be looking at something that's human-made, maybe left by a spiked tire. Of course, such holes are perfect for making up stories about creatures from other planets who allegedly made them. Or maybe even legendary monsters, like that one from Loch Ness. It's definitely hard to explain such symmetry of the holes, but one deep-sea biologist offered a pretty good explanation. He said there could be an animal burrowing beneath the sediment, and from time to time, it could make little chimneys just to get access to clean water circulation in its small burrow. I mean, there are sediment piles around the opening of each hole, and they do support the idea that something pushed the soil from below. But there's still no proof these holes are actually connected beneath the surface. And there are also a lot of things hidden at the bottom of the oceans and seas that ancient civilizations left us. For instance, archaeologists made a really cool discovery off the southern coast of Croatia. A road hidden under layers of sea mud that's 7,000 years old. They found the ancient road at the sunken Neolithic site of Solin. The site of Solin was a human-made island in ancient times, and an archaeologist discovered it 2 years ago. He was studying satellite images of the area around Korčula, one of the beautiful Croatian islands. When he realized there could be something interesting at the bottom of the sea, he dove into the water with his colleague. And under the surface of the Adriatic Sea, which is part of the Mediterranean Sea, at a depth of 13 to 16 feet, they found stone walls that were most likely part of some ancient settlement. The landmass where people built the settlement was separated from the main island by a narrow stretch of land. Luckily, this area is protected from big waves by the surrounding islands, so the site remained relatively well preserved. It's now hidden beneath the surface of the sea and covered in mud. But it's so exciting to imagine how people walked on that road nearly 7,000 years ago, visiting nearby settlements. If you want to see the weirdest creatures, you can always head to the bottom of the sea. Actually, scientists have determined there could be more than 30 potentially new species at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. They've collected them using their remote-controlled vehicle. That's a big step because until recently, they could only study such creatures through photographs. I'm talking about segmented worms, different types of coral, some invertebrates similar to centipedes, and many others. But there are also many old freaky creatures that we already know about that look like they came from sci-fi movies. Red octopus, blobfish. Okay, this one kinda looks normal until you raise it to the surface. The goblin shark, Sloane's viperfish, zombie worms. Ugh. Yeah, I hear ya. Let's move on. The seafloor hides things from space too. There are traces of rare forms of plutonium and iron at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And what's awesome is that all this has come from space. These radioactive materials probably formed during some kind of cataclysmic event in space and eventually made their way out to our beautiful home planet. And this extraterrestrial debris most likely appeared on Earth within the past 10 million years. After it fell to the Pacific Ocean and settled at a depth of almost a mile, it became part of all those layers of rock down there. Plutonium is especially exciting for scientists. I mean, only tiny amounts of it have been found, hundreds of atoms maybe. But it's still remarkable because these atoms are created by exploding stars. Things like this can help us better understand how the universe produces elements heavier than iron, like plutonium, gold, uranium, and platinum. We're still not sure about the origins of these elements. For a long time, scientists believed that supernovae, which is when a star comes to its end in a fabulous explosion, were responsible for creating these heavy elements. But it seems it's not just that. Some other cosmic events, such as the collision of neutron stars, which are super dense collapsed stars, or some rare types of supernovae, could also be involved. Whoa, let me get my popcorn.
A wanderer walking through a desert feels the scorching sun like never before. You can see him from afar thanks to his shining clothes. His long hoodie is covered with foil. It reflects sunlight and protects him from heat. The ground is so hot that shoe soles can melt on it. That's why the wanderer's boots are covered with heat-resistant material. A cloudless sky, barren land, and heat. But the wanderer is not in the desert. He's walking on the ocean's bottom. He doesn't know why this happened, but all the oceans on Earth dried up. It happened almost instantly, and even the greatest minds in the world don't know why. The wanderer knows only one thing. When it happened, his family was on the other side of the ocean. For several months, he's been traveling across this lifeless land, and he won't stop until he finds his family. The landscape around is spectacular. People have finally found out the secrets of the ocean depths. The seabed consists of huge mountain ranges and volcanoes. They fell asleep forever after the water had disappeared. Also, there are huge trenches leading to the unexplored depths of the planet. People had to build bridges to get over these enormous cracks in the ground. But most of the ocean floor is flat plains, boundless, lifeless, merciless. The wanderer's walking across a huge canyon. Once, it was swarming with sea life. The man puts on a gas mask, but not because of a sandstorm. Many fish and other marine inhabitants used to live in such canyons. Now, all that's left is a terrible smell. The wanderer passes by huge skeletons of whales. Among them, he notices dirty tents. People are hiding there from heat. The temperature in the area is much higher than in the Sahara Desert. One of the main functions of the ocean was to distribute heat all over the planet. The sun emits heat and radiation. The ocean absorbed this energy. Lots of currents were warm, and they carried this warmth around the world. The water got heated at the equator, then it evaporated and turned into clouds. When warm air rose, it pulled along colder air from below. This allowed the energy to be evenly distributed. In simple words, the ocean cooled hot places and brought warmth to cold ones. Now there's none of this. Every day the sun burns the equator and dries up the rest of the planet. The wanderer doesn't come close to the tents. He is carrying the most valuable treasure in the world and doesn't want people to notice him. The inhabitants of Earth are just trying to survive, and many have forgotten about such a thing as morality. Fortunately, the wanderer still remembers. The thoughts of the family help him remain a good person. Sometimes it complicates his life. Like now, for example. In the distance, he sees a young girl. She doesn't look well. There's no one around, and the wanderer decides to help her. Out of his backpack, he pulls a thing worth more than all the gold on the planet, a bottle of water. The girl takes a few sips, but instead of thanking the wanderer, she starts screaming. It's a trap. Her accomplices appear from different sides. Looters. They're gonna take everything. The wanderer runs away. He hasn't eaten for several days, and his strength is leaving him. He won't be able to keep going much longer. The marauders are closing in on him. The wanderer throws the bottle aside. His pursuers rush to the water like crazy. They forget about the man and fight one another for the bottle. The chances of the wanderer's survival have greatly decreased. He could make this bottle last at least several days. Plus, he's also lost a lot of fluid because of running. In the beginning, there was no panic because of a lack of water. The ocean dried up, but its waters were salty anyway. People still had seas, lakes, and rivers. But the problem was that the ocean was feeding them. When the ocean water evaporated, it formed clouds. These clouds moved all over the world and enriched lakes and rivers with rain. Now, there are almost no clouds. The sun started heating Earth much more. Lakes and seas dried up alarmingly quickly. At that moment, real chaos began. The sun is going down on the horizon. Sunset is near. It's not so hot anymore. The exhausted wanderer continues walking. In the distance, he notices something that makes him stop, take out a small shovel, and start digging quickly. There's no shelter around, just a flat plain. The wanderer speeds up, otherwise it might be too late. The pit is finally ready. The man jumps down and covers his head with a cloak. A few seconds later, a strong ash storm passes through the entire plain. The smallest particles of ash can penetrate through clothes and get into the lungs. The wind is so strong that it can knock anyone down. When the oceans dried up, the sun began to burn the surface of the planet. This led to massive forest fires. The flames destroyed almost all the trees. Huge clouds of carbon dioxide and ash formed. Driven by the wind, they travel the world and poison everything around. The wanderer is sitting in the pit while a terrible hurricane is sweeping over his head. He thinks of his family and slowly falls asleep. Cold wakes him up. Frosty air chills him to the bone. So it's night now. The wanderer climbs out of the pit and finds himself under bright stars. As soon as the water dried up, almost all clouds disappeared. Factories stopped working. Cars no longer emitted carbon dioxide. Thanks to this, comets and the most distant stars can be seen in the sky. The wanderer has seen them 1,000 times, but he's still not used to the breathtaking picture. It's like he's looking at the sky through a telescope. An icy gust of wind brings the wanderer back to reality. He won't survive the night if he doesn't find a warmer place. Before, nights were warmer thanks to the energy of the ocean. Now, as soon as the sun goes down, temperatures drop dramatically. The wanderer needs to move to stay warm. He starts walking faster. Soon, he notices some lights in the distance. It's probably other looters. The wanderer goes deeper into the valley. Stars and the moon illuminate his way. Unfortunately, he is running out of energy. He pulls a protein bar out of his pocket, but he needs at least a bit of water to eat it. To digest food, your body needs liquid. If the wanderer eats the bar, he'll only get thirstier. He can't walk and falls to the ground. He checks his pockets and finds a small kerosene tablet. He lights it using a matchstick. A tiny flame protects him from cold. To distract himself from thirst, the wanderer takes out an old MP3 player. He charged it during the day using the solar panels on his backpack. The man puts on headphones. Classical music calms him down. He lies on the ground next to the burning tablet. He needs to gain strength to continue his journey tomorrow. It's morning. In an hour, the sun will start burning the ground again. It's crucial to find water while he still has some time left. The wanderer inspects the territory and notices a spot where the ground is darker. In his previous life, the wanderer worked as a surveyor. He takes a few steps and touches the ground. It feels cool. There's an underground spring here. He begins to dig. The ground is getting wet. Water starts seeping out of the soil. The wanderer fills his empty bottles. Things don't look that bad anymore. It's getting a bit more difficult to breathe with each new day. In the past, phytoplankton and algae produced up to 70% of all the oxygen on the planet, but not anymore. Several days have passed. The wanderer runs out of water and food again. Fortunately, not for long. He's now walking among huge sunken ships. He sees modern aircraft carriers, liners, and even ancient pirate boats. In the distance, he spots huge mountains. The tops of these rocks are what used to be called the shore. The ocean floor is ending. The thoughts about reuniting with his family give him more strength. The man reaches the top and finds himself in the middle of a ruined city. It's empty. Where have all the people gone? Where is my family now? The wanderer asks himself. The man walks through the abandoned streets and meets an old man. He says that almost all the people who used to live here left the city and went to Antarctica. The wanderer has a new goal. He's going to get to the icy mainland no matter what. He will find his family.
When the water in all the oceans becomes transparent, the world will change forever. In a few years, people will discover thousands of new sea creatures that were previously unknown. Simultaneously, the planet will lose hundreds of thousands of fish and mammal species too. The cycle of life on Earth will be interrupted, and humanity will face natural disasters and famine. The beginning will be incredible. Imagine you're sailing on an expensive liner somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. Suddenly, you hear screams. All the shocked passengers come to the edge of the deck and watch an incredible picture. The ship seems to be floating high in the sky. Under it, the water is completely transparent. You see volcanic sea mountains and coral reefs of different colors and shades. The bottom is thousands of feet from the surface, so it feels like the ship is floating high above the ground. Only the fish swimming in this sky let us know that the boat is still on the water. The ocean is about 5% explored. In just a year, this number has increased to 70%. Humanity uses powerful telescopes to study space. Now, when the water is transparent, all the scientists turn their telescopes toward the seafloor. Every day, people discover a new kind of fantastic sea creature. Many of them look pretty scary. A colossal octopus, transparent clams, ugly toothy fish, sea spiders, rainbow jellyfishes. The Mariana Trench can now be fully explored. If there is a kraken, a megalodon, or any other sea monsters in the world, people will soon know about them. Relaxing on the beach is growing more popular than ever, but swimming in the water is a little frightening now. Imagine you're sailing on a yacht in the open sea. You decide to jump from the deck into the water to cool off. You feel dizzy because of the height you see below you. Also, you notice a huge squid the size of a house in the depths. It's unlikely it will swim to you because it's so far away, but you still get creeped out. When planes fly over the ocean, it seems as if they are twice as high in the sky. Skydiving over the water is becoming a popular sport. The average altitude of a skydive is 10,000 feet, but if you jump over the ocean, you'll feel like you're falling from a height of 36,000 feet. It's like jumping out of space. Fishing has become more profitable because all fish are visible from the surface. Boats from afar notice a school of fish and catch it. Because of this visibility, many fishing companies have become more competitive. When two ships try to capture the same prey, a conflict occurs. The water in the ocean is divided into borders. Companies began to buy it as they would land. Fishermen started to hunt unknown creatures. Companies built expensive bath escapes to capture the prey in the underwater depths. Because of this, rare species of dolphins, whales, sharks, and other sea creatures are on the verge of extinction. Governments in many countries spend small fortunes to fight poachers. All over the world, more and more people are becoming treasure hunters. If you fly a few miles in a helicopter over the ocean, you see that the seafloor is scattered with sunken ships. Old pirate ships of the past centuries, modern boats that were considered missing. Hundreds of divers swim to the seafloor to explore the ships. The treasures found there can be sold for thousands and millions of dollars. In addition to vessels, people find submerged ancient cities. New chapters of world history are open to scientists from all over the world. People would finally solve the mystery of Atlantis and find out why crafts disappear in the Bermuda Triangle. The number of shipwrecks in the world has significantly decreased. Even if a boat sinks, rescuers quickly notice it and fly to help. Submarines no longer sail almost anywhere in the world. They served as secret stealth vessels, but now all secrecy has become transparent along with the ocean. Besides the treasure, people see all the garbage that has been thrown into the seas. Billions of tons of plastic lie before the eyes of all mankind. All the water is littered with trash of different colors and different sizes. It's undeniable how marine life suffers from this. It's impossible to turn a blind eye. People decide to save the ocean. In many countries, releasing plastic into the sea becomes illegal. Plastic recycling plants are built in a lot of cities. All the world's sea ice has become transparent. Trips to the Arctic are trending. The Valley of Ice and Cold now resembles a world of crooked mirrors. Some of the ice is so transparent you can't even see it. Because of their transparency, more sunlight passes through. The water level is rising, but it's not a big problem because the water in the ocean evaporates faster too. These massive vapors condense into huge thunderclouds. Heavy rains pour for weeks and even months. Some cities are flooded. Many countries have declared a state of emergency. Previously, the ice reflected the sun's rays and sent them back into space thanks to its white color. Now, vast chunks of ice, some the size of a country, let light through. Our planet gets too much ultraviolet light. Because of this, the atmosphere is being destroyed. Every year, more and more solar radiation penetrates the Earth. This affects crops and increases the incidence of diseases among all living beings. And this is just the beginning of the problems. The ocean contains many microscopic substances needed for small organisms to live, such as phytoplankton and seaweed. They are food for larger creatures, krill. Life in Antarctica depends on krill. Fish, whales, and penguins feed on it. If they can't feed on krill, large predators won't feed on regular fish. The ocean is blue because of the salt and various small microorganisms, algae, and nutrient mud. As soon as the water became clear, it lost all its nutrients. Many fish and marine mammals are disappearing from our planet. Sunlight penetrates to the farthest depths of the ocean. The sea creatures that live there were not used to the light. New conditions adversely affect their lives. People discovered so many new species, but lost almost all of them just as quickly. Because of the sun, the water heats up more, and the amount of oxygen decreases. Fish are now not only hungry, but can't breathe. There is a worldwide shortage of fish. Cities that used to live off fishing are growing poorer. Animals, such as gulls, bears, seals, and many others, can't find food and are on the verge of extinction. In restaurants, fish becomes an expensive delicacy. People create artificial lakes and breed fish there, but this is not enough to save the planet. When the ocean was not transparent, the water evaporated and condensed in the sky, along with many nutrients. Rain clouds formed, and the wind drove them around the world. Now, jungles and rainforests feed on lifeless water. This affects the entire animal world. Trees and plants in the rainforest stop growing as they used to. Animals become sick more often. And because of prolonged heavy rains, nature is drowning. The circle of life is broken. Fortunately, this is unlikely to happen. the sea is enriched by the deserts. Every year, 2 billion tons of dust rises into the air. Most of this dust comes from the deserts. Then, 1/4 of this falls to the seas and oceans and becomes food for microorganisms. Therefore, the dust must disappear for the ocean to become transparent. But it's not just dust that's the only source of a nutrient-rich ocean. Tropical rains fall in the forest of the Amazon. This water, which is also filled with nutrients, evaporates and condenses into a cloud and pours into rivers, lakes, and oceans worldwide. This feeds algae. Plankton and krill feed on the algae, and larger fish eat plankton and krill. This circle of life shouldn't be broken, so it's essential to keep the oceans and seas clean. Well, I think we all realize that something strange is going on with the oceans when those creepy creatures start popping up. A fish with a long bony stick growing out of its head, a creature that looks like a pulsing pile of spaghetti, a white shrimp the size of an adult's palm, a toothy fish with glowing ribs, a huge sea beetle the size of a cat, a purple jellyfish that looks like lava. Some people call them monsters. Some are sure they come from another planet. Fortunately, scientists quickly calm people down. These creatures are inhabitants of the deepest parts of the sea and have always lived here. Something's forced them to come to the surface. In the Atlantic Ocean, off the coast of Antarctica, a research ship gets into trouble. A block of ice breaks off from a large iceberg and falls onto the deck of the ship. Severe frost, icy water, an impending storm, there's almost no chance of salvation. Waiting for rescuers is impossible. It'd be days before they're found. Several crew members fall overboard and find the water is… that's weird. The water's warm. Thanks to this, the crew manages to hold out much longer, and they get rescued after all. All the oceans begin to warm up. Normally, water's heated very slowly from the outside, from the sun, greenhouse gases, that sort of thing. Even a tiny increase in temperature means big problems. Now, the ocean is heating up quickly and from the inside, from the bottom. Scientists send down one of those deep water research things, which can handle high temperatures and pressure. The deeper down it goes, the fewer living organisms they see swimming around. Almost at the bottom, the water becomes very hot. Scientists spot a crack in the Earth's crust. It's like a volcano, only flat. The hot energy of the Earth's core spills out and heats the ocean. Life down there quickly becomes impossible, so all the deep-sea creepy creatures start to swim up to the surface. The world's oceans are basically still a mystery. Whatever unknown animals were lurking in its depths, they're all swimming around on the surface now. Huge squid, the size of a bus, appear out of nowhere and attack ships. That Kraken myth's not sounding so crazy now. Oceanographers discover new species of animals every day. But hot water isn't the only thing forcing all these beings out of the darkness. There's not enough oxygen in the ocean now, as warm water has way less oxygen in it than cold. Following the monsters from the depths, hundreds of thousands of whales, dolphins, sharks, and ordinary fish swim to the surface. All the rich life of the underwater world floats close to the shores to get at that precious oxygen. People can't step foot on the beach anymore, at least not in the water. Who would dare to take a dip in the ocean if there's a chance of meeting a humongous squid or a hungry shark? Yikes! Crabs and turtles come ashore. The struggle for food begins amongst all sea creatures. People don't exactly just sit by doing nothing. Fishing goes into overdrive. Of course, fishing like that can't last forever. Hot water quickly evaporates on the surface of the oceans. The massive amount of water vapor turns into huge rain clouds. The wind drives the clouds inland, and epic rains begin to fall on cities and towns everywhere. It's been raining all day. A powerful river of water is flowing down the street outside your apartment, taking cars, mailboxes, and trash along for the ride. You're a glass-half-full kind of person, so surfing time! The next day, the rain continues, and the next one too. The ground floor of every building is underwater. It's like a new sewer system. That means the streets aren't just filled with rainwater, it's way nastier than that. Luckily, the rain's finally ending. The water's slowly receding, but there's another disaster ahead. Thanks to all that hot air caused by the warmer oceans, tornadoes, typhoons, and hurricanes become a daily nightmare. Strong winds blow off roofs and ground all air traffic. Windows don't stand a chance. People are mostly hiding in their homes, hoping that everything will end soon. But this is just the beginning. The hurricanes calm down. You can step out onto a deserted, wrecked street and notice a large shadow. It's getting bigger and bigger. You turn around and see a giant wall of water. A huge tsunami is bearing down on you. You run back inside and head for what's left of the roof. The gigantic glaciers of Antarctica have been melting because of the hot ocean. Water levels are rising all over the world. Huge tsunamis are everywhere, flooding coastal cities in every continent. The landscape of the planet is changing. Millions of years ago, almost all the world's deserts were actually at the bottom of seas and oceans. Now it's happening again. Tsunamis are replaced again by new rains and hurricanes. Humanity begins to accept that life on Earth will never be the same. The biggest human migration in history is already underway. Flooded megacities are empty. Being able to swim becomes essential for survival. You and other people manage to survive on small bits of land, far enough from the water that hurricanes and tsunamis aren't that bad. Some settle in the mountains, which now just look like small islands surrounded by lifeless water. Life is slowly getting better. You get used to the endless downpours and frequent moves. But there's a new problem. More than half of the oxygen on the planet comes from seaweed and phytoplankton. These organisms use the sun's rays to convert carbon dioxide into oxygen. Now, because of the hot water, they're all gone. Most of the forests and fields are flooded. The Earth's atmosphere is losing its enormous reserves of oxygen. It's getting hard for people to breathe. Oxygen is really crucial for your mind to work properly, not just your body. You move more slowly, you can't make smart decisions. You forget where you're going and why. Makes it kind of hard to solve all your huge problems. But the Earth is awesome at adapting. Pretty soon, the planet's ecosystem starts to get back in balance. The water in the oceans is still hot, but not everywhere. In some parts of the world, new seas have formed. Thanks to the melting glaciers, the water in these seas is nice and cold, and seaweed reappears. The air gets filled back up with oxygen, and you take your first deep breath in ages. But the endless rains keep coming. And it's not just the ocean getting hotter, it's also the atmosphere. Those life-saving new seas start evaporating. There are completely lifeless spots on every continent, full of hot water and hot air. But people aren't running out of water. There's a steady supply from the melted glaciers, which are mostly not salty, so score. In place of Antarctica, there's now a freshwater fifth ocean, or is it a sixth ocean? I can never remember. Marine life adapts to the new conditions. Pretty soon there are fish everywhere. Now people have access to nutritious fish and algae. Some people don't want to bother with the constant flooding and just decide to live on the water all year round. They build large cruisers, complete with apartments, schools, gyms, restaurants, shops, and a whole lot of sushi. You decide to go on a trip around the world, and now's the best time to do it. You can actually sail over flooded cities. Sometimes you can even see the tips of skyscrapers sticking out through the water. More and more people decide to spend their lives wandering the oceans. The cruisers get bigger and bigger. Then, people start combining ships to create enormous floating cities. There's a rush for the new tech that can help us live underwater. Half of humanity ends up living under the sea. But there are still epic problems. Scientists need to get in gear and figure out how to stop the oceans from overheating. It's even starting to boil in some places. That means, in the future, water reserves will evaporate and the oceans slowly dry up. Engineers create huge cooling filters and install them all over the planet. It's not going to fix everything, but it'll make enough cool water for us to survive. Fast forward 1,000 years, and some oceans are bone dry. That means new continents. The nonstop rains almost stop. Whatever cracks opened up that heated up the oceans have sealed themselves back up. The planet survived, but it's got a serious makeover. In some places, the ocean floor has been transformed into cities, farms, and forests. Where there's still water, the hot new pastime is underwater excursions. Want to swim through Times Square or take a scuba selfie by the clock on Big Ben? Hey, go for it! Check it out. This is the deepest and most unexplored part of our planet. It's so deep that if you stick Everest in it, its peak will still be underwater. This is the Mariana Trench. It's located in the western Pacific Ocean, and its maximum known depth is 36,000 feet. And this is you, an average person who burns with interest to understand what is at the bottom. You're tired of watching documentaries about the Mariana Trench, so you decide to check it out yourself. But you have neither a special suit nor a submarine. You only have an air tank and a brick which you tied to your leg. Take a deep breath and dive in. 5 feet underwater. You don't feel anything unusual. This is the depth you might jump into a pool or swim at the beach to see exotic fish. 5 feet doesn't cause any inconvenience and you feel quite comfortable. But the brick pulls you deeper, and soon you find yourself at a depth of 32 feet. Here, you begin to feel the main problem of diving so deep. And no, it's not hungry sharks looking in your direction. It's that kraken! No, not really. The main threat is pressure. On the water surface, you felt 1 atmosphere of pressure. At a depth of 32 feet, this pressure is double. Now, don't worry, you're safe for now, but you may already feel discomfort in the eardrums. This is because the pressure causes the air volume in your body to compress. You'll feel this in your ears, sinuses, and lungs. But these air pockets in your body are flexible enough to withstand even more specific depth. You continue to descend. 65 feet underwater. It's already quite dark here, and the discomfort from the pressure increases. If you're not a trained diver, you begin to feel the pain in your ears. Now your lungs are reduced in volume by 3 times. If the air sacs in your lungs collapse, air bubbles will get into your blood and you may suffer an embolism or stroke. You've reached 100 feet. This is the maximum depth divers go for recreational purposes. You need to be a well-trained and experienced diver, like me, to cope with the pressures 3 times higher than usual. In addition to this, you begin to feel a new symptom, nitrogen narcosis. The air in your body is made up of 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. At higher pressure, nitrogen begins to have a toxic effect on your body. You feel a slight dizziness, tunnel vision, memory impairment, and unexplained cheerfulness and excitement. Narcosis can cause visual and auditory hallucinations and make the diver do strange things. For example, dancing. Yes, it might be the most peculiar dance in the world, but narcosis can cause worse consequences. The diver may think he can breathe without equipment and inhale water. To avoid this, divers use gas mixtures with higher oxygen and lower nitrogen content to reach greater depths. You're still committed to the dive and find yourself at a depth of 196 feet. Here, even regular oxygen becomes toxic. That's because you're consuming it at 7 times the pressure of what you're used to. Oxygen intoxication can cause seizures. If there are no professional divers nearby to help, you may be in big trouble. To avoid such intoxications, helium is included in diving gas mixtures. But it's not to make your voice funny. Theoretically, with helium in the tank, a diver can reach a depth of 984 feet. Hey, you've reached 702 feet. This is the world record for free diving. Herbert Niche was able to achieve this depth without special equipment in a single breath. Yeah, I know it sounds strange, but it was easier for him to reach this depth over divers because he didn't use gas mixtures in an air tank and he didn't face narcosis. For his achievements, he received the title of the deepest man on Earth. In 2012, he reached a depth of 831 feet, but was severely injured in the process. At 831 feet, you should look around. You may encounter a submarine because they travel at this depth. But we've reached your limit. Another couple of meters and your dive will end badly. But we know people can withstand a lot more pressure. Many experiments have been conducted to find the limit of a human's dive. Using special chambers that simulate deep diving conditions, theoretically, a person can withstand a depth of 1,640 feet. But it would take a long time to reach the surface from such a depth due to the need for decompression. You see, during diving, nitrogen, helium, and other gases accumulate in your body tissues and blood under high pressure. It takes time for these gases to naturally leave your body through your lungs. If you reach the surface too quickly, these gases will form into bubbles, destroy blood vessels, and block blood flow. So divers must make stops on the way to the surface to just hang out there and simply breathe away the nitrogen. Better bring a book. Sometimes it's necessary to spend a whole month in a special decompression chamber to avoid traumatic consequences. For safe dives at great depths, you need special equipment. An atmospheric diving suit is used for long, deep-water dives up to 2,296 feet. It's like a mini submarine, which a person can wear. There's no need to worry about decompression sickness or nitrogen narcosis, because the pressure in the suit will equal 1 atmosphere at all depths. Plus, you don't even need to be an experienced diver to use this suit, but it may cause claustrophobia. Alright, so what if you want to go deeper? For this, you will need a submarine. The Triton 6600-2 is a private submarine that can reach 6,600 feet. The only disadvantage of this submarine is its price, $5.5 million. But let's assume that you have that money and you deploy your Triton 6600-2. Can I go along? Great! At its maximum depth, have you reached your destination? Actually, I'm afraid not. You have to overcome a depth 6 times deeper than that. Unfortunately, we can only reach the bottom of the Mariana Trench using drones. So, the human body can withstand enormous pressures. This is because our body is made up of 70% water. How deep can a person actually go before the pressure harms them? For a person, this depth is 22 miles. Our bones break at 24,600 pounds per square inch. This means that the depth at which our skeleton will be crushed is about 22 miles. Yeah, I think your eyeballs will pop well before that. But living organisms exist below this crush depth. The Mariana snailfish lives at a depth of about 26,000 feet. Their bodies are adapted to withstand incredibly high pressure. They chose this habitat because there are few predators and they feel safe. They can reach a length of 11 inches and weigh less than half a pound. Their diet is made up of tiny crustaceans, which crawl on the ocean floor and have lots of frustrations. Ooh, that rhymes. Let's go even deeper. We're close to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. These are cold waters where the sun's rays have never reached. But there is also life in this darkness. We just need to look very closely. Bacteria and yeast live here. This discovery surprised scientists because it was thought no living organism could survive such conditions. These microorganisms probably feed on particles of animal waste and dust that have fallen to the bottom. This discovery opened up new opportunities for scientists and motivated them to explore the depths of the oceans. Now, let's return to the surface. Wow, what a journey! After such an experience, you certainly don't want to dive again without preparation. So, to start out, practice holding your breath underwater in the bathtub. And watch out for kraken.
You know how they say it's better to just hand over your wallet if you run into a mugger? Instead of surrendering their wallets, sea cucumbers choose to spit out some of their insides to fend off predators like crabs and fish. It's a natural defense mechanism for them, and they quickly grow those organs back in just a few days, thanks to special cells inside their bodies. It's not the only weird thing sea cucumbers do. They can actually breathe through their rear end. They have this thing called a respiratory tree that connects to their backside and sits right next to their intestines. So when they suck in water from their behind, it goes into that respiratory tree, letting them absorb oxygen directly into their fluids. Plus, sea cucumbers are the janitors of the ocean. They munch on whatever gets stuck in the sand on the ocean floor. Once they've eaten, they manage to clean out the sand, leaving it nice and tidy after they do their business. As for the clean sand, the stunning white sand beaches in Hawaii are actually a product of parrotfish number 2. These fish munch on algae from rocks and dead corals, and while they're chomping away, they also grind up the leftover bits of coral in their bellies. When they're done, they move their bowels, and voila! It all comes out as beautiful sand. Not only do they play a vital role in keeping the coral reef ecosystem healthy, but they can churn out hundreds of pounds of this white sand every year. Marine animals are seriously impressive when it comes to holding their breath. Just look at sperm whales and elephant seals. They can stay underwater for a mind-blowing 2 hours. Then there's the Cuvier's beaked whale, which holds the crazy record at almost 4 hours underwater. When you compare that to the human record of 24 minutes and 37 seconds held by pro diver Budimir Shobat, it seems pretty insignificant. But what's the marine animal's secret that helps them excel humans this much? Unlike us, these sea creatures have a ton of hemoglobin and myoglobin in their blood and muscles, allowing them to store way more oxygen. When their oxygen runs low, myoglobin steps up and releases even more. Plus, they can tolerate higher levels of CO2, so they don't feel the need to breathe as quickly. There's even a study that found their myoglobin molecules have a unique charge that keeps them from sticking together, which boosts oxygen storage. And on top of all that, they can slow down their heart rate and restrict blood flow to hang out underwater even longer. Rumor has it that about 540 million years ago, a meteor loaded with frozen octopus eggs smashed into Earth. Sounds like a delirium, but some scientists are entertaining a very questionable idea that octopuses and their cephalopod buddies, like squids and cuttlefish, might actually have some extraterrestrial origins. The thing is, cephalopods have extraordinary DNA that doesn't look like any other DNA on our planet. They've got around 33,000 protein-coding genes in their genome, which is way more than what we humans have. A recent study suggests that their evolutionary story shows some odd traits that might hint at a connection to space, like they could be from some super far-off past, or even the future. The researchers went as far as to claim that modern octopuses could be the descendants of these frozen creatures that hitched a ride on comets and splashed down in our oceans. And why octopuses? Well, they really stand out in the animal kingdom. They can use different tools to build their own houses, and they can even solve everyday problems independently of their brain, as 2/3 of an octopus's neurons are in its arms. These traits seem to have just appeared out of nowhere during evolution. They even tossed around another quirky theory. What if an extraterrestrial virus crashed into early squid populations and gave them a crazy boost in evolution, turning them into the octopuses we know today? Anyways, these are just fun speculations without any hard proof. Now, this funky object is an animal, not a rock. It's called sand dollar. Just look at the shape of its shell. Once sand dollars are exposed to the sun, their shells lose their soft, spiny covering and become bleached white. Back in the day, beachcombers thought these shells looked a lot like big silver coins, kind of like the old Spanish dollar that was about the same size. But if you prefer, you can call them sand cakes instead. These quirky creatures have tiny spines on their surface, and they glide along the ocean floor. They use small tube feet that line the grooves on their underside to grab bits of food like plankton and algae, which they then send to their mouths. Inside, they have 5 triangular teeth that help them munch on their meals. In some Georgia folklore, sand dollars are said to represent coins lost by mermaids. Sand dollars have a unique talent for cloning themselves. They can do this for a bunch of reasons, like when a predator comes around. Some species of sand dollar larvae can actually split in half as a defense mechanism. It takes about 24 hours for them to clone themselves, and the new larvae end up being about 2/3 smaller than the original, which helps them hide from danger. Wait, is that a giant sea hot dog racing through the ocean? Sorta. Some scientists have joked that sperm whales seriously resemble enormous hot dogs. These massive creatures can take quick naps, standing up for about 10 to 15 minutes. They only sleep about 7% of the time, mostly between 6 p.m. and midnight. Sperm whales also have a cool ability to retract and extend their eyes, thanks to a thick retractor muscle around them, but they can't actually roll their eyes in their sockets. Plus, they have the most asymmetrical skull of any mammal out there. Oh, and let's not forget, they have the largest brain of any living creature, weighing in at over 9 pounds. Unlike us humans, if dolphins went into full-on snooze, they'd stop breathing and could drown. So they figured out a genius solution. They let only one side of their brain sleep at a time. This means one half stays awake to keep them breathing and watching out for any potential threats. When they snooze, they only close one eye. If their right brain is resting, their left eye is shut, and vice versa. This unique sleep style is called unihemispheric sleep, and it lets them recharge without ever fully losing awareness. On top of that, dolphins might be using corals and sponges like their own little pharmacies. Scientists have seen them rubbing their bodies against specific types of coral and sponges, suggesting they might be treating skin issues. They've even spotted dolphins lining up to take turns at these spots, using corals like Gorgonian coral Rumphella aggregata, leather coral, and some sponges. What's really fascinating is that researchers have analyzed these corals and found they contain compounds that could help with dolphin skin conditions, which can sometimes lead to infections and lesions. Now, the big question is figuring out exactly how each type of coral helps dolphins, and if it really boosts their health overall. Sea urchins aren't exactly the Usain Bolts of the ocean. They move slowly by crawling with their tube feet and occasionally give themselves a little push with their spines. These little guys have just 5 teeth, which they use like a beak to scrape algae off rocks, which I'm pretty sure is the ocean's version of an all-you-can-eat buffet. But since all that scraping wears their teeth down, they're in a never-ending dental replacement program. Scallops are the underwater equivalent of the world's most confused security cameras, sporting up to 200 tiny eyes on their shells. These eyes are high-tech. They can even adjust their pupils to light. Instead of working like ours, scallop eyes have a unique setup. Light goes through a pupil, lens, 2 retinas, and then hits a mirror made of guanine crystals that reflects it back. Scientists were puzzled about how they see since their main retina often gets blurry light. But it turns out, scallops can change their pupil size by about 50%. Just don't expect them to do it in a hurry, as it takes a few minutes.
Now here's something really neat about orcas. They're expert hunters, and they do it in groups called pods. A pod can consist of up to 40 orcas, forming a very effective hunting team. Interestingly, there are distinct types of pods: resident and transient. Resident pods are more into fish, while transient pods have a taste for marine mammals. But no matter what type of pod they belong to, all orcas have one thing in common: they are master collaborators. They work together using smart hunting techniques that are often compared to the teamwork of wolf packs. Almost 95% of jellyfish's body is made of water. For comparison, the human body is 60% water. It's probably not a surprise since jellyfish don't have a heart, blood, eyes, or brain. The other 5% of their body weight is proteins, muscles, and nerve cells. Jellyfish have been around for more than 500 million years. This makes them older than dinosaurs. These creatures haven't changed much, and today's jellyfish are pretty much like their ancestors. Electric eels have small eyes that are not so effective in environments with no light, so they mostly rely on their electric organs. Those consist of 6,000 cells. Eels use them to stow power, similar to batteries. These creatures use electricity like bats use their radars or dolphins their sonar. An eel can also produce enough electricity to power a panel of light bulbs. There's a small tropical archer fish that can learn to recognize human faces. This fish has an interesting ability to spit small jets of water from its mouth. Researchers showed the fish the image of two different faces placed side by side. One was unknown and the other was familiar. The fish was supposed to spit water at the familiar one. The creature took the right guess more than 80% of the time. There's such a thing as a sea unicorn. That's an animal called the narwhal. Its horn is actually a tooth that can grow up to 10 feet long. Manatees, also known as sea cows, are distant relatives of elephants. Their weight can go up to 1,000 pounds. These creatures are vegetarian and need to eat around 10% of their total weight on a daily basis. That's lots of sea salad. In some cases, manatees share space with alligators, but they get along pretty well. You can even find a photo from Florida where an alligator rides a manatee's back. Frogfish have special fins that help these creatures walk along the sand. They're very useful in shallow waters. A ghost pipefish is hard to see, but once you spot it, you're bound to get really surprised. Its head makes up over 40% of its body. Crabs don't feel like wasting time on such formalities as putting foods in their mouth. That's why they taste it with their feet, which is where their taste buds are. Marine iguanas are the only lizards on our planet that like spending time in the ocean, even though they mainly live on land. They're herbivores that feed in shallow waters and swim like snakes. Iguanas use their long claws to hold on to the bottom when they need to graze. Green turtles can cross over 1,400 miles when migrating. They try to find the perfect spot to lay their eggs. Penguins sort of fly when they're underwater, reaching a speed of 25 miles per hour. More than 5 million years ago, I've heard, I wasn't around then, deep sea worms and humans had a common ancestor. So we still share 70% of our genes with these creatures, and with sea stars, squid, and octopuses. Now, octopuses are in fact incredibly old. The oldest known fossil belongs to an animal that lived almost 300 million years ago. FYI, this is before our dinosaur buddies roamed the Earth. Wait, there's more! Octopus arms have a mind of their own. That's because 2/3 of their neurons lie in their arms, not in their heads. This means that their arms can problem solve how to open a shellfish, while their owner is worried about other stuff entirely. Talk about ninja-level multitasking. Oh, and like other animals, such as chimpanzees and dolphins, octopuses have proven to be good at maneuvering tools, like picking up old shells and using them as a temporary home. Now, of course, the most intelligent animals on our planet are humans, according to humans. But we don't seem to give pigs enough credit. Pigs are so smart they can play video games. No, not Minecraft. But in a recent academic study, scientists had 4 pigs play a joystick game. They had to manipulate the stick so that the moving ball would hit the wall and then they would get a treat. All 4 pigs did great in the test, which was surprising even to the scientists. Now, pigeons also aced an impressive test. They were trained to differentiate a Picasso painting from a Monet one, which they had no trouble learning. Then they were able to apply this knowledge, identifying works of art they had not previously seen, meaning they really understood the difference between each painter. Poor things are always seen as a nuisance. Now, if we placed kangaroos in an animal's most amazing ability contest, they'd win. It's mainly because they break the 4-legged rule. A special species of kangaroo, the red kangaroo, uses its tail to help propel it forward. Now, visually, it has 4 limbs, but in practice, it uses 5. They're biologically built to use their tail as a 5th limb, since it's packed with articulated vertebrae and thick muscles. Of course, it had to be an Australian animal. Deep within the Sahara Desert, you'll find a little creature known as the fennec fox. This huge-eared animal adapted perfectly to survive in its hostile environment. The huge ears help them to dissipate the unbearable heat of the desert, as well as help them to hunt for underground prey. Now meet this guy. Unlike what its name might suggest, the red panda is closer to a raccoon than it is to a giant panda. You'll find a lot of these cat-sized creatures in the Himalayan region, hopping from tree to tree and bundled together trying to keep warm in the harsh weather. They're gentle and friendly like their big panda cousins and occasionally enjoy eating some bamboo sticks. And then there are bees. Compared to humans, bees' brains are the size of pinheads, yet they are capable of astounding things. Let's say a bee is running low on energy after a long search flight. This bee desperately needs a drop of honey in order to continue flying, but smartly enough, she doesn't need to go back to the hive to recharge. She can ask a fellow beehive mate for a drop of honey directly from this other bee's stomach and continue flying. This type of decentralized system allows them to build highly effective societies, one that bees don't need to push the queues in front of the honey cells, for example. Every year in the winter, great white sharks that live along the California coastline disappear. It feels as if they take a vacation for 30 to 40 days. The animals go to a point halfway between Hawaii and Mexico. They might do it to get some food, relax, or hang out with their buddies from other areas. The spot is now called the Whale Shark Cafe. Some types of sharks, like makos, whale sharks, or white sharks, breathe in a very specific way. It requires them to swim all the time. They also need to move quickly and with their mouth open. This way, the oxygen can enter and reach their gills. Sea sponges are some of the most primitive animals. They're immobile, don't have a mouth, eyes, bones, brain, heart, lungs, or any other organ whatsoever. And still, they're alive. There's such a thing as a sea unicorn. That's an animal called the narwhal. Its horn is actually a tooth that can grow up to 10 feet long. Manatees, also known as sea cows, are distant relatives of elephants. Their weight can go up to 1,000 pounds. These creatures are vegetarian and need to eat around 10% of their total weight on a daily basis. That's lots of sea salad. In some cases, manatees share space with alligators, but they get along pretty well. You can even find a photo from Florida where an alligator rides a manatee's back. Frogfish have special fins that help these creatures walk along the sand. They're very useful in shallow waters. A ghost pipefish is hard to see, but once you spot it, you're bound to get really surprised. Its head makes up over 40% of its body. Crabs don't feel like wasting time on such formalities as putting foods in their mouth. That's why they taste it with their feet, which is where their taste buds are. Marine iguanas are the only lizards on our planet that like spending time in the ocean, even though they mainly live on land. They're herbivores that feed in shallow waters and swim like snakes. There's something known as the orange cat behavior, and apparently it's not just a meme. So far, scientists have been able to understand that coat color is connected to a feline's gender. And since orange is an X chromosome, orange cats are usually males, like Garfield. The so-called orange cat behavior describes ginger cats as agents of chaos. Again, pretty much like Garfield. However, there haven't been any conclusive studies on whether coat color and cat behavior are truly linked. In terms of vision, mantis shrimps probably have the most psychedelic vision out of all animals. These funny-looking creatures have a whopping 16 varieties of photoreceptors, with 5 of them reserved for the ultraviolet or UV spectrum. Ultraviolet rays are really short wavelengths, which are invisible to humans. The thing science still doesn't understand is how exactly these mantis shrimp view the world around them. Sure, they can perceive a bunch of colors, but they can't necessarily distinguish all of these colors among themselves. It can be that they just see a lot of really vivid, really blurry colors, but we haven't figured out a way to check that out. Now, to say sloths are cute is an understatement. They may be one of the friendliest animals in the jungle, but there's more. If you look closely at their fur coat, you'll notice hints of green. These greeneries are actually tiny little algae that grow alongside sloths. They help sloths to camouflage better in the jungle, but they also nurture them. The little cracks inside a sloth's fur create the perfect environment for algae reproduction, and scientists have found species of algae that don't exist anywhere else in the world. They do get by with a little help from their friends. Deep within the Sahara Desert, you'll find a little creature known as the fennec fox. This huge-eared animal adapted perfectly to survive in its hostile environment. The huge ears help them to dissipate the unbearable heat of the desert, as well as help them to hunt for underground prey.
Many terrifying animals live deep beyond the waves, like this vampire squid living 3,000 feet below the surface in almost complete darkness. This animal has a cloak, like a vampire's. That's why it's called the vampire squid. Deep down at the bottom, it can't use ink to defend itself. So this animal has developed an unusual tactic. It glows slightly to scare away predators. If this tactic fails, the vampire squid can turn its body inside out, revealing tiny spikes. When you translate its scientific name, Vampiroteuthis infernalis, it literally means vampire squid from the nether. Despite its terrifying looks, it's a harmless ocean animal. This previous creature was not from space, but this object definitely is. Before Elon Musk found a way to reuse rockets, NASA would simply drop old ones after launching astronauts into space, most of the time in the ocean or deserts. In 2012, Jeff Bezos launched a mission to find the Apollo 11 rocket. They found it by using sonar, but it was in terrible condition. It was sitting on the bottom of the ocean, not far from the predicted site. They were able to rescue the engine and reconstruct 2 of them. The most famous lost city is Atlantis, but sadly, we still haven't discovered it. However, Heraklion was also just a myth until one British pilot saw something that looked like a city while flying over the Mediterranean Sea. He reported it, and 60 years later, a group of divers went there. They were shocked when they found an entire city underwater. It was loaded with artifacts that could tell us a lot about the history of the place. Now it's one of the best underwater archaeological sites in the world. It's believed that the rising sea caused the whole city to go underwater. The Titanic sank in 1912. The wreck was claimed to be officially discovered 74 years later. In reality, though, a fisherman found the Titanic 8 years earlier while fishing in the Atlantic Ocean. He was pulling out his net when he spotted a head stuck in it. Luckily, it was just a doll's head. Years later, after the fisher had passed away, his son sold the doll to a doll collector. She did a lot of digging and research on every person who had a porcelain toy on the Titanic. She found the owner of the doll. Ava Hart was on the Titanic and had a doll with her. Ava survived the catastrophe by a miracle, but her toy didn't. Hart even wrote about the doll in her journal, and every detail matched the toy found by the fisherman. The tripod fish lives deep in the abyssal zone, around 20,000 feet below the surface. It's adapted to such immense depths and uses its tripod fins to stay still on the bottom. This creature doesn't have big eyes, but even if it did, these eyes would be useless in the darkness. Instead, the tripod fish uses its fins like antennas to detect any movement in the water. This creature doesn't have much luck when it comes to its love life, so it had to develop unique tactics to reproduce. One fish can be both male and female. The next bizarre creature is the lizardfish. It has tons of razor-sharp teeth, a huge mouth, and really big eyes, which it uses for hunting. All this makes the animal look freaky. The lizardfish lives at depths of around 11,000 feet in the midnight zone, where there is zero light. This freak of nature basically eats everything it can fit inside its mouth, from small fish to other lizardfish. On the other hand, when they see other reptile fish, they probably fall in love instead, because finding mates at those depths is not an easy task. Like the tripod fish, the lizardfish can be both male and female at the same time. When you think of a river, you usually picture it on land. Still, nature is quite unpredictable, and it created a river flowing under the ocean in California. It's running at a depth of around 2 miles. This river has everything that an ordinary river has: sunken logs, trees, and rocks. And despite its uniqueness, it's not the only one in the world. There are also others in the Amazon and Greenland. A terrifying creature was discovered near Angola's coast by a remote operating vehicle. It looks like it doesn't have a head or a body. It was sitting at a depth of around 4,350 feet below the surface. After doing research, scientists concluded it wasn't anything from a sci-fi movie. It was just a cluster of siphonophores stuck together. In 2015, some random guy was diving in Caesarea, and something shiny caught his eye. He reached out, grabbed it, and realized it was a gold coin. After that, he examined the bottom and found out that there were many more. He reported the incident to the local authorities, and they concluded that he had found Arabic treasure. The coins were made of solid 24-karat gold and were a few thousand years old, but due to the perfect salinity and temperature, they looked brand new. The coins belonged to a ship carrying cargo. It was caught up in a storm and unfortunately sank. One of the weirdest things ever discovered was found in the Baltic Sea. It's an anomaly that looks as if it was created by a different civilization. It was discovered by Swedish researchers, and they basically had no idea what it was. They had to ask tons of other scientists for their opinions. When you look at this formation from above, it's 200 feet long and looks exactly like a fallen spaceship. It's hard to believe that it's a natural formation, but spoiler alert, it's totally made by nature because the Baltic Sea has gone through many erosions throughout history. Most likely, the bizarre formation is the result of these processes. A group of divers in Madagascar were shocked when they found this 7-foot monstrosity of a knife on the seafloor. The speculation started immediately, and many said that the knife was from some giants that had fought megalodons and lived on Earth thousands and thousands of years ago. That could make a nice story, but the knife is most likely a movie prop that was lost at sea. One of the ocean's most bizarre animals is the frilled shark. It's believed that this fish is the reason for all those sea serpent stories that sea explorers of the past wrote about. These animals live pretty deep in the ocean, but sometimes they can be seen in shallow waters. It's super rare, but possible. The frilled shark has a big mouth sporting around 300 teeth. It also has a long body that looks like a lizard's, and it is truly a unique species of shark. Its prey can be half of its size because this shark's stomach is like that of a snake, and it can swallow huge fish or crustaceans. Spotting a few worms in your garden is no big deal, but after seeing a 26-foot long one in the ocean, you will make your wetsuit a little wetter. This worm is super rare, and it's completely harmless to humans. It's actually not a giant worm. It's a cluster of zooids that are stuck together in a worm-shaped formation. They usually only eat plankton, bacteria, and other tiny things that can be found in the ocean. Probably the scariest thing in the ocean that is 100% real is the magna pinna, which can be found at crazy depths of 20,000 feet below the surface. This monster looks like an underwater Slender Man, but it's just a squid with really long tentacles that can reach a terrifying size of 8 feet. This guy has only been seen a few times, and basically, we don't know much about this creature so far.